Good afternoon. My name is Untitled from the Strategic Communications at the Ministry. And today we're joined by very distinguished ambassadors. Her Excellency Hafsa Al-Ulama, Ambassador to Germany, His Excellency Abdullah Sibusi, Ambassador to Australia, and His Excellency Fahad Rabbani, Ambassador to Canada. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for your time today and to join me to discuss further your experience in your host countries with tolerance. Knowingly, in the UAE, tolerance is a way of life and a key pillar of the governmental policies, interfaith dialogue, and international partnerships. And with more than 200 nationalities living together, the UAE is one of the most diverse countries in the world, and its success is built on openness, inclusiveness, and mutual respect. Let me start to ask each of you to give an opening remark, if you don't mind.
Sure. Who will start? Do you want me to start, Hamza?
Of course. Yes, here we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity and my greetings to everybody, to my colleagues, of course, and to all the audience. I think it's a great day to talk about, and a very important time also to talk about tolerance and the importance of it in the world. I think on the 16th of November is going to be the International Day for Tolerance, and it's a good time to be celebrating that. UAE is definitely, I would say, a star when it comes to tolerance. The whole year last year was actually a year of tolerance, dedicated to this important value and principle. So I hope that through the discussion today, we can talk about what are the areas that we are working on in tolerance to promote it globally also. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Fahad.
Thank you, Hamda. And I would say good afternoon to Hafsa, and I would say good evening to Abdullah in Australia. It's always great to be here, to see you and to see some of our colleagues and talk about important topics. Today's topic about tolerance, I think there couldn't be a better time to have this session. Talking about tolerance in the UAE, I think this goes back, even before the foundation of the United Arab Emirates. We were born and raised to accept others, to accept people from, different nationalities, to accept people from different races, from different origins, different cultures. And I think this is one of the main aspects that differentiated the United Arab Emirates from, many countries around the world. Hafsa just said, or Hamda, we have more than 200 nationalities living in, peace and harmony in the UAE. I mean, that's a great statement. If the UAE wasn't a tolerant place, if the UAE wasn't a place of, accepting, diversity, accepting people from the different parts of the world, I don't think we would have had those 200 nationalities. If those people were not happy in the UAE, I don't think we would have 200 nationalities. So I think, having, this diverse group of people living in the UAE, I think is one of the greatest statements that the UAE presents to the world today. And, I'm very pleased to be with you and, my colleagues here to talk about tolerance, hopefully, giving the people listening in, not boring them, but giving them some insight into our views about tolerance.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Abdullah.
I want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for, and of course the Tolerance Committee for this opportunity to talk about a dear subject to, I think, all Emiratis. I think part of the success of the UAE is its tolerance that was brought or cemented by the founding fathers of the UAE. I don't think when a lot of I just got done with an event where I hosted the Speaker of the Parliament and the President of the Senate, and attended by many businessmen who have done business in the UAE. And their comment when they know that I was going to do this webinar was that this is a big factor and why they chose to do business in the UAE. This is the part of the appeal that they can, the lifestyle, how welcoming the people is really, it goes along with many things that made the UAE so special and contributed to its success that we, thank God, we are witnessing under our wise leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies. So let me begin. Your Excellency Hafsa, so my question is to you. What is the significance of tolerance in our modern world? And how does the UAE set an example for tolerance? Your Excellency, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute, sorry. So thank you for that. Acceptance of the other and the respect for different views and beliefs are crucial to a stable and peaceful world. Very important. And actually, if you go and you look at history, really history has taught us that if you have exclusion, hatred, or even intolerance, that leads to discrimination, despair, and war. And history of Europe, and especially in Germany, in particular, where I'm present, has really taught us this lesson to say never again. Very important. It becomes even more important to have countries to have tolerance as part of their governance. UAE is always a great example of that. And it's a country where tolerance is really driving the national strategy, in my opinion. And when we talk about the values of tolerance, I have three major factors that I can talk about, which are special to our country, that can become a model for others. Leadership, inclusion, and positive contribution. When it comes to leadership, I think the others also, my colleagues talked about, it started with the beginning of our country, with the late Sheikh Zayed, when he made tolerance and accepting the others as a main point of growing this country. That included not people from all colors and all nationalities, and also different gender. I mean, so for women and men. I remember when we were children, we had to go to school like all the other boys that had to go to school, and that was imposed on every family to do it. So that really built this understanding between different people. Inclusion, of course, UAE is, as we said, home to people from all over the world. In UAE, we even have a law against discrimination. And if you know, just a few days ago, there were even more laws introduced to give the protection of every person under the law. So that is very important. Positive contribution. Again here, this is the foreign policy part of UAE's work on tolerance. How we even take that through the global aid that we give to the world. And that is very important because we do not distinguish between, which political system or which country. We've provided, and especially when it comes to Corona, I think it's important. We've provided support in the healthcare to countries from Costa Rica going to Vietnam all the way and in between. And this is really showing where UAE stands when it comes to tolerance. It is institutionalized in that way. And I just would like to, finish this part, if I may, by giving a quote from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the Vice President and ruler of Dubai, when he really summarized the essence of UAE, when he said, what makes us proud is not the height of our buildings or the magnitude of our shopping malls, but rather the openness and tolerance of our nation. We are implementing this every day, I think. People can see it all over. So this is the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That's very true. The UAE did show so many layers of tolerance, inclusivity, and accepting of others. And speaking about also Germany's journey towards tolerance, that reminded me, Your Excellency Abdullah, how do you view multiculturalism and tolerance in Australia?
That's a great question. I think Australia is really a melting pot society. This reflected by its multicultural composition of its people, immigration policy, and its prohibition on discrimination. I think there's a problem. Its prohibition on discrimination, equality for the law for all people, as well as various cultural policies which promote diversity. I think there is a problem in the sound. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Your Excellency. I think we should all mute and you would be fine.
And evidently, Australian citizens descend from more than 300 different ancestry groups, including its First Nations people. And, before we start any event, usually we start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people who inhabited the capital and pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and future. And according to the last census, nearly half, 49% of Australians had either been born overseas or or both parents had been born overseas. More than 1/5, 21% of Australians spoke a language other than English at home. The most common language spoken after English are Mandarin, Arabic, Cantonese, and Vietnamese. So Australia is also religiously diverse with the different sects of Christianity. It's the most common religion, I think 52.1%, followed by Islam, which is only 2.6%. The second largest religion, followed by Buddhism, which is 2.4%, while 30% said they had no religion. And the Australian society is a tolerant and inclusive. A study published that I saw the other day by the Sydney Morning Herald found that Australians are mostly tolerant toward cultural differences. One key difference to other countries is that Australia does not only permit multicultural expressions in the private sphere, it's openly collaborated publicly. There are annual multicultural festivals hosted across all states in Australia. Since I've as an embassy, we participated in one in Queensland, and we did one here. This year, the embassy participated in the Canberra National Multicultural Festival. Over 3 days, cultures from every continent, including food and cultural activities, and thousands and thousands of visitors. So.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That is very interesting also to see how such a melting pot Australia is and how everybody works together in that community, and understanding that our embassy have worked very well within the society. Your Excellency Fahad, also understanding the UAE's embassy's participation in many events. And there was one in particular that you have organized, which is the first North American exhibition of Afghan peace carpets by Fatma bint Mohammed bin Zayed initiative held in Ottawa. So can you please tell us a little bit more about the initiative, and why did you choose to highlight this specific initiative, knowing how beautiful and impactful it is?
Thank you, Hamda. Before answering your question, I just would like to take a step back and elaborate a little bit on Hafsa and Abdullah's statements around a few very important issues here. Mentioning tolerance, we talk about acceptance. We talked about inclusion. We talked about positive contribution. We spoke about, supporting one another. I mean, these are pillars of tolerance, and these are embodied within the United Arab Emirates and within people from the United Arab Emirates. So it's not, when we talk about tolerance, I think it's very important to talk about, how do you explain tolerance? It's not a new initiative. It's not a new, topic that is, has just come up in the UAE and suddenly became an important topic. it's something that has been, that we grew up with. And I think this is very important to mention today, not only for people in the UAE, but to the world. When we, when we supported the other countries in Corona, it's not just because we want to say, the UAE is a rich country and yet it has to support other countries because it's got the, the wealth and it's got the, the supplies that we can provide to other countries. I think it's the statement that we have sent to the world, supporting more than 120 countries during COVID. I think this is a great testament to the world that, we will be there whenever we are needed and whenever we can provide and support countries who are in need, no matter how different we are, no matter if we have disagreements, but we will still be there to support humans and support humanity. So going into the, Fatma bint Mohammed bin Zayed initiative, it's an initiative that was established in 2010. And, talking about the Peace Carpet initiative, I think it's important to give a little bit of history around that. Previously, a country like Afghanistan, it was deteriorated by war. The women used to produce what was called a war rug. And it was something that they would do. And even, on the rugs itself, you would see weapons, you would see things that would only make you think of war. Because that was their, they were producing that during a period of war. When this initiative came about, that war rug has been changed to a peace carpet. So instead of people thinking about wars, we wanted people to think about peace. And, up to today, more than 4,000 Afghani women have been, are working on this initiative. When we hosted it here in Ottawa, we wanted to showcase an initiative that we did in the UAE to support, people in other countries and to provide them with an opportunity and to provide them with, thinking positively in, for a better life. So instead of people just thinking about war, people thinking about peace. And more importantly, it was, in this initiative is the women aspect. They are recognized as equal, respected, valued partners, which is a direct principle of tolerance. And I think, Hafsa would elaborate more on, women and tolerance throughout our discussion today. Thank you, Hamda.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That's very true. And that's a very interesting representation how a collaboration can influence tolerance and can portray it even further. Your Excellency, Hafsa, I wanted to ask you, how does tolerance play a further impact to the relations between countries? If you can give some examples as a female ambassador, we had an example saying that females play a huge role in tolerance. If you could elaborate further.
Sure. Thanks a lot. I think, tolerance is actually the foundation of relations, international relations between countries, because we have to realize that every country is different. Their political systems are different, their ideologies, their religions, so all of this is very important. So that becomes very important. That will be a bridge always that you can build between countries. And in that way, it's essential to have, the acceptance of the other and to know that the other can be thinking different or cannot maybe agree with you on everything, but to come into a common ground between each other. So that is really important in international relations between our countries. The other area that I think tolerance does, it actually breaks, in a way, stereotypes also. It's very interesting because as a woman ambassador from, our part of the world, from Arab country, from the Middle East, there is always, I feel, a stereotype that, the women do not have the same rights as men in our part of the world. And I come across a lot of this. So what UAE is doing is actually breaking these stereotypes when we go abroad. I can give you examples. I have, for instance, many meetings that I had with officials. When I go and meet them, before I introduce myself, I find the others always say, yes, hello, but where is your ambassador? They think that the ambassador has to be, and I've come across few times in few countries that I've been to. This is the first question I get sometimes, which is quite interesting. And we're talking about not only countries that people say, maybe they are developing, but these are advanced countries in the world also. We're talking about the West. So it's very interesting. So these kind of taboos are there everywhere. And the other thing that is important for us to talk about, I think, just to add, is that tolerance does not come just automatically. It's not like, so you have to work hard in making it a major part of your policy, of your work. And you can do that in many ways. Of course, by talking about our country and what we do, that will be one area. Also, then we'll be participating in different programs that are in the host country that we are there. In Berlin, there are so many examples. For instance, now recently after the normalization of relations between UAE and Israel, one of the first things we did was important to go and visit a synagogue, for instance, and have a chat and have others come and discuss about these areas. So it's very important to show that we not just talk about this, but also we do it by action. And being a woman really provides this opportunity to break this mindset that is always there. So that will be that is quite interesting. I just wanted to excuse myself, Hamda, because I have another meeting coming up soon. If you don't mind, in the middle, if I leave, it is because I have another meeting that is been scheduled beforehand. Sorry for that. Go ahead.
Of course, no worries, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to have you here with us. Just to elaborate further in regards to speaking about women and breaking stereotypes and how the UAE actually embedded it within its policies. And I wanted to ask you, Your Excellency Abdullah, and that from your experience, how did the Australian government approach promoting tolerance and inclusion? How were they able to embed it within their policies and make sure that tolerance is a priority in the country?
Thank you, Hamda. That's a great question. But I want to make a comment, if you allow me. I think we are very proud of our female leadership. To be honest with you, Hafsa, you go out there on the ground, and we are very proud. You're a role model to Emirati women, and honestly, the comment that I get a lot is how capable is Her Excellency Reem Al Hashmi, how capable is the many women role models, Dr. Amal Al-Baisi, head of our Federal National Council, so many to count, and this is really a source of pride and a testament to where we are today, not as far as the narrow sense of tolerance, but I think in general as a country. Similarly, I think, from my experience here and going back to your question, Hamda, multiculturalism is not just a label, but has been actively supported by the Australian government. Since the 1970s, and very much so in the UAE, we have been doing the same, although the label is not the same. It's not, now that we have a tolerance, it's how, like Fahad mentioned before, it's part of our culture. For example, I'll give you an example. The Australian Multicultural Council, AMC, Australians love their acronyms. So is a ministerially appointed body representing a broad section of Australians interested that provide, independent and robust advice to government on multicultural affairs. The social cohesion and integration and of the society, and also the programs that the government has to offer. I've read, I think, if I'm not wrong, that Australia had a multicultural statement back in March of 2017. This is before my time in Australia, but they offered this beautiful document, and it's a statement signed by the Prime Minister back then, and supported by the ministers who interact with this subject, under the title, I think, Multicultural Australia, United, Strong, Successful. And this document, I can see similarities with the UAE, but you know, I might be able to talk more about it later in the discussion. A regular interfaith and intercultural dialogue is critical, as we have implemented in the UAE, to reduce the possibility of tension within communities and to strengthen the cohesion and harmony. You know, such dialogue helps to reduce prejudice, promote cross-cultural understanding. It also improves relations between different ethnic, religious groups, and maybe enhance the sense of belonging and trust. And I think in the UAE, maybe I can talk about this later, but you know, there is similarity with our tolerance program. The fact that we have a committee, a tolerance committee, you know, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is something really wonderful in that retrospect. But maybe I'll come back to that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is very interesting to see how Australia approaches such a topic as tolerance. I do see that a lot of governments, or basically in societies, tolerance is not seen as something that should be embedded in policies, but in a way to promote it, it is as important. And as we've been mentioning, that the late Sheikh Zayed, he rooted tolerance and rooted the essence of welcoming everyone in our DNA in this country, in the UAE. Your Excellency Fahad, I wanted to ask you if you could share also some of your experience with the Canadian government and how tolerance is embedded in their policies. Also knowing that Canada is in the Americas is considered very tolerant.
Well, thank you, Hamda, once again. I think it's very important to, you know, when we talk about tolerance, to mention, you know, how tolerance brings us together. You know, in a country like Canada, and you know, I would like to emphasize also on some of the issues which Abdullah touched upon, you know, which is, you know, interfaith or intercultural exchange and dialogue. This is of extreme importance, especially in today's world. And if you look at what the UAE has done over the past years to emphasize on that aspect, look at the Abrahamic House. Look at the Pope's visit to the UAE and having the Mass, you know, in Sheikh Zayed Sports City, with, I think, 150 or 180,000 people attending that Mass, the first time in the Gulf. You know, we were criticized a lot by many people, but we still moved ahead, because the message that we're trying to send across is people from all over the world are welcome in the UAE. No matter where you're coming from, no matter what your beliefs are. I mean, Abdullah was talking about, you know, how the different nationalities, the different, faiths in Australia, whether they're Christian, Muslims, Buddhists, or others. In the UAE, it's the same. we've got Muslims, we've got Christians, we've got Jews, we've got Buddhists, we've got Hindu, we've got, the rest continues. I think, these are very important issues that we have to emphasize on, and we have to show why is the UAE doing that. So it's not by coincidence. When you have Pope Francis and the Sheikh Al-Azhar, sign an agreement in Abu Dhabi, that's a great testament that we are encouraging interfaith dialogue. When His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, announced the Abrahamic House in Abu Dhabi, that's a testament to the world. That was before the agreement that was signed with Israel. Okay? So I think these are very important for us to showcase and to show the world that, we can all live together. At the embassy, we've participated in, in many events, because I believe it's very important on us to showcase what our country does. For example, last year the UAE hosted the Special Olympics, first time to be hosted in the region. Countries from all over the world, including Israel, participated. Okay? So what the statement that we're sending here is, we all have issues. Leave alone, people with disabilities also have, or what we call them in the UAE, the determined. They have their challenges, but so do us. We have our challenges. I truly believe, we all have, different strengths and skills. But hosting the Special Olympics, hosting the Abrahamic House, hosting the Pope Francis and Sheikh Al-Azhar. I mean, we are showcasing that, the UAE is really moving ahead when it comes to, accepting one another, when it comes to, the bigger issue of tolerance, and when it comes to the, living together in peace and harmony. So, I'd leave you with that.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And I think we've touched upon this, saying, comparing the UAE with, or noticing the UAE's activities with tolerance, and how the UAE is hosting the Abrahamic House. How did it host the Special Olympics and more events? And Your Excellency, Abdullah, I wanted to ask you, the similarities and differences between the UAE and Australia when it comes to tolerance and acceptance. What are your opinions about that?
Hamda, that's a great question, but I think it's a unique position of ambassadors around the world is to observe, their home, home country, and and they are guests in this country, and they compare endeavor. And in preparation for this webinar, I think it was a good chance to reflect on many. And I was able to ask and research this with my Australian friends, and because I think both UAE and Australia are home to, like we said before, more than 200 different nationalities, and both countries are multicultural, multi-religion, they're multi-racial societies. All these groups are well integrated and accepted in Australia, as it is the case in the UAE. There will be minor differences, and this is due to cultural differences in many ways, including, when it comes to respect of law and celebrating diversity and promoting inclusion. These are the same. There is much emphasis in both UAE and Australia on encouraging and promoting acceptance and understanding, and ensuring that our societies continue to be safe, cohesive, harmonious. This concept of mutual respect and denouncing racial hatred and discrimination is central to how we the two nations view our roles, our citizens in both countries. I think this is I've seen as very common. And I think, also there is something to be said about how both governments adopted policies and programs with numerous community and volunteer activities. This is to inspire and support and sustain the unity or the cohesion of a society. That's thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is very interesting to being an ambassador in a foreign country and having to reflect back. It is a very good opportunity, I think, for many diplomats around the world to have that opportunity to reflect on themselves, on their country, and the country that they are in, and bring a difference to the world and try to make sure that they are representing their country to the best abilities, and as well be as respectful to the host country that they are in. And I wanted to ask you, both of Your Excellencies, if you have any final remarks that you would like to say.
So, Hamda, I think discussions like these are very important, and I think it's as Abdullah said, we as ambassadors, have an important role, not just presenting the country because taking it just from being there at events, or I think in today's role it's very important for us to get out of the way of how ambassadors used to work, and to really be spokespeople and to showcase to other countries, wherever we are, what the UAE is all about. Whether it's about, today we're discussing tolerance. But I think what's more important when we discuss the issue of tolerance is to show people how tolerant we are, in our actions, in what we do, and how we live our lives. Not just having it as a statement that, well, the UAE is supporting tolerance. Because the people are interested in the how. They're interested to hear more about, our story. Because I truly believe today, we have a great success story in the UAE. Previously, we used to go out and we used to see what are the best practices of countries all over the world and bring them to the UAE. I think today is the time that we can export our best practices. I'm really serious about this because, we have come a long way, in a very short period of time, in less than 50 years, the UAE, climbing the index, whether it's, business indexes, whether it's in quality of life, whether it's in, international aid and other areas. So I think this is our role. And it's upon us to show the world what we have achieved. Because if we don't do it, no one's going to do it for us. Okay? We are ambassadors, and we have a certain, duty to perform here and to really show why the UAE is different, why the UAE's presence today in the world is important, and why the UAE's contribution to the world, has value. When we work together with the, during COVID, with the World Health Organization, it's for a specific reason. And this is not because of the COVID pandemic today. It goes way back. If you take about, if you look at international aid, the UAE is the #1 country in the world when it comes to, international aid per GDP. Okay, we are the #1. And I believe, our leadership plans on maintaining that position. We don't want to let go. So I think all of these positive, aspects and positive, issues that we represent in the UAE, need to be recognized. And we as ambassadors, as Abdallah was saying, we have to be responsible and we have to showcase that to the world. Thank you.
I want to continue, Hamda, after where Fahad stopped. I think we have an advantage as not just as ambassadors, but as UAE citizens. So we have a great story to tell. The story of the past 50 years. And, the theme 2020 towards the next 50 is still on. It was announced by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, preparing, for the next 50 years. And one of the pillars, I think, is having a happy and cohesive society. Establishing a secure, tolerant, cohesive, and ethical society that embraces happiness and positive lifestyles and high quality of life. This pillar, which focuses on, developing programs to prepare future generations to serve as the UAE goodwill ambassadors, not just, career diplomats or ambassadors who we have right now and diplomatic corps, but as well as promoting, we spoke about this women participation in all sectors, making the UAE one of the best places in the world to live. And it's, like I said before, a big part of this success is of course tolerance, how the government, the wise leadership of the UAE interacted all these programs in all aspects, not just, in the government and we have a tolerance committee in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is a new way, a radical, really thinking out of the box. I've been into a lot of places, very limited governments, such as the UAE, planning for the next 50 years. I truly believe that I will have a grandson that will be in the settlement in Mars in 2071, because I have great trust in our leadership, in our people. I'm very proud of all the things like the Youth Council in our ministry, which is one of the so many different ideas that make our approach to tolerance different, and very proud of it, very much so. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. In a way, we can say we're lucky to be in the diplomatic corps to represent the UAE all around the world and to showcase the many achievements that the UAE has done throughout many sectors, as you've mentioned a few of them, and specifically in tolerance. I would like to thank Your Excellencies for joining me today and to have this great discussion. It was very fruitful, and I'm sure that our listeners had a really great time, and I know for sure that they have even more questions now. But however, this discussion was very, very interesting and very, very dynamic. And thank you all.
Thank you, Hamda.